Hi everyone, it's Yvette Le Blowitz from SpiritGirl.com and welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today in this online audio and video space and with our very special guest, and her name is Jordanna Levin. And she is the best-selling author of Make It Happen, the host of 3 successful podcasts with a background in journalism. She's built a reputation for taking big topics and making them relatable, digestible, and downright entertaining. And she currently spends most of her time in Byron Bay, and she's now the author of one of my go-to favorite books for Valentine's Day and well beyond, Higher Love. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So first of all, before we dive into the podcast show, I just want to congratulate you on the launch of your brand new book, Higher Love. And big shout out to your publishing house, Murdoch Books, because the cover is gorgeous. Yeah. And everything that's in the book also.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, covers are so important to me because I'm absolutely the kind of person who judges a book by its cover when I'm in the bookstore. And my first book, Make It Happen, the cover was exceptional and everyone raved about it. And I was like, we have to match the cover. You know, it has to be just as good as Make It Happen. And I think they did a really good job.
Yeah, really beautiful job. So for those of you who are tuning in globally, can you tell them a little bit about yourself? Like what got you into this path of writing books, spirituality, and believing that there was something higher than ourselves?
Yeah, I've always been a very spiritual person. I kind of grew up like that. My mum raised me like that. She was quite spiritual. But at the same time, my dad, who's actually also very spiritual when you break it down, he was very corporate though. So, you know, everything was very practical and rational and logical with him, where mum was a little bit more sort of like hippie woo-woo. So I had this really beautiful cross-section growing up. I went into journalism. I studied journalism because I loved writing. But also I'm a very curious person and I love investigating and getting to the bottom of things. And so after working in the publishing industry as a journalist for 10 years, I was actually in food publishing, which is kind of funny because I don't do anything with food anymore. But after 10 years of doing that, I went out on my own and I started writing articles about spirituality, but in a way that made it really relatable to the people that weren't quite on board yet, because I find the concepts of spirituality really wonderful, but sometimes they're a little bit too ethereal or a little bit too unattainable. And I wanted to sell them's not the right word, but portray them in a way that made the average person of the wider community interested to learn more.
Yeah, well, you definitely have done that for sure. And it's incredible. When you mentioned your mum, and you mentioned her in the book too, yeah. Was she into meditation, reading self-help books and living more of that kind of yogi woo-woo life?
Yeah, it's funny. Look, she never did yoga and she never meditated, but she was very grounded in spirituality. There was always conversations about the universe. We were always looking at the lunar cycle. We had crystals all around the house. She was a tarot reader. My mum's very psychic as well. So yeah, there was spirituality woven through it, but not in the really sort of classic yoga meditation way, I guess.
Wow, that's so incredible. So you obviously learned all about the crystals, the healing. What a gift. What a gift.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
I think I took it for granted growing up. I just kind of assumed everyone had that stuff, but no.
No, 100% no. No tarot card readings the Oprah show was a definite, and self-help books and things like that. But that's incredible that your mum introduced you to that, because now we get to sort of benefit in these times from her influence. So Higher Love, that's the title. It says everything you need to manifest more love in your life. But what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been asked that a lot. My first book, Make It Happen, was about manifestation and sort of normalizing manifestation, making it really practical. There was a chapter in that book about manifesting love. And I found it a really actually it was a very hard chapter to write, but enjoyable in a sense. And a lot of people really connected with that chapter. And there was so much more I wanted to say that I couldn't just fit into those 25 pages or whatever it was. So I decided to write a whole book about it. And I think if I look back on my life and the experiences I've had with love, which many of them I share in the book, I kind of feel like I was always leading up to putting it on paper one day and telling the story. Otherwise, I kind of feel like, what was the point of all of that? I needed to give it meaning.
Yeah, I love this. Now, when we talk about higher love, so we grew up in an era, especially in Australia, and this would probably be globally in many countries, where we learnt from a young age that love came from a guy. You needed to find a prince, and you needed to find a guy or someone else, something outside of you to feel love.
Yeah.
But your book is totally the opposite to that, where it's all about inward love and loving yourself first, and turning up where you don't need to meet that guy to complete you because you're already complete. Can you share more about that with our audience?
Yeah, I think that many of us, and look, this is such an interesting conversation to have because, and I say this in the book, I am a white heterosexual woman who dates men. And so in the context of talking about it, it sort of tends to become very heteronormative, the language I use. But I think that it can be used for any sexual orientation that you might have or any gender. So, but I do use man and woman a lot. So if people can just bear with me and then use whatever suits them. But I think for women especially, we wait to be chosen. And when we're looking for love, we sit at a table on a date and we think, oh God, I hope he likes me. Instead of thinking, do I like this guy? Like, is this the kind of guy I want to hang out with a little bit more? It's just like, oh my God, I hope he likes me. I hope he chooses me. And I really want to change the narrative around that. I don't think it's necessarily about having to love yourself more. I think that you can experience love without loving yourself. But what it is about is understanding yourself and having a really acute sense of self-awareness, who you are, what lights you up, what brings you joy, and what strengthens your vibration. And this is how I describe it in this book, this idea of your personal vibration. And what it really is your authenticity. So what are the things that keep you in alignment? And can you maintain that alignment to a degree? We're always going to fall a little bit to the side, but can you maintain that alignment when in a relationship? And if you can't, is it really worth the self-sacrifice? And I think that women especially do sacrifice themselves in relationships. And this is where I'm sort of flipping the perceptions of love on their head and saying, instead of falling in love, where we sort of feel out of control and like we don't have a say in it, what if instead we rose in love and we were uplifted by the kind of love we want to create in our lives?
Yeah, that's gorgeous. And can I say, in your book, you have so many hilarious dating stories. There were so many funny ones in there. And I don't want to give them away because I'd be giving the book away. But you also take your readers, which I've joined you on, a path of really working out your personal values.
Yeah.
Which I loved. But we had to do a kind of cleansing process where we had to literally go through every breakup, can you share more about why you wanted to include that? I found it was really liberating, incredible, like a great detox and starting fresh. But can you share more about that?
Yeah, well, it's a part of the book. I think the chapter's called Who the F Wrote My Love Story. And basically it's saying, we, without even being aware of it, subconsciously we've become the protagonist in our own love story. And our story is influenced by many things, by the movies we watch, the books we read, the relationships we witnessed growing up, whether they were our parents, our grandparents, just adults around us, but also our past relationships. And when we move on to a new relationship and try and find love with someone else, it's very normal to be taking experiences from past relationships and using those to shape the relationships going forward. But that's not always fair on the person, but also on you. So what I talk about in the book is this idea of closing the loop and going through. We do a whole series of exercises, but one of them is going through past relationships, whether it was a long-term relationship or a date or a crush or whatever it was, anything that impacted you in one way or another, and working out what the point of it was, what lessons you learned, and in some cases, finding closure by forgiving either that person or forgiving yourself. And we do it by writing a series of letters, which I think is really powerful. Do not send the letters, capital letters, do not send those letters. But just writing it out and seeing what the lesson was is enough to not have to repeat the lesson again.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. It was really therapeutic, and I totally recommend everyone do it, because there is even stuff you forget about, but you still subconsciously are holding on to it. And then you think, hang on a minute, you're carrying that across to the next one and the next one. And then that was incredible. And I loved chapter 3, What's Killing Your Vibe. That was amazing as well. Like the comparison trap. We obviously, there is this thing, and whether you're a man or a woman, but the age of 30, like I felt immense pressure. By 30, you got to be married and have kids, and and now we're using social media, and you might be seeing all of these, your friends, having these incredible relationships and kids running around the house and this happy family. And then we know that some of our listeners out there for Valentine's Day or Galentine's Day are like, I've had so many people reach out and say, oh my goodness, I'm divorced or I'm getting divorced and I don't even know how to start this whole online social media, online dating thing. You talk a lot about that in your book. Many people in their 40s plus aren't fans of online dating.
I don't think anyone's a fan of online dating, to be honest with you.
You set some really good ground rules there, and some inspiration, direction, guidance on kind of how to look at online dating from a positive perspective. Can you just share a few little tips for the person out there that's thinking, oh, am I ever really going to meet someone on this app? Should I really put my profile out there? Is it really worth it?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, like, if your intention is to go out on a date, dating apps are the most efficient way to do it. If you go and sit in a bar and wait for someone to pick you up, it's not going to happen, because it's 10 times easier for that person to hop on their phone and pick someone up that way. So I do think that if dating is your end goal, then absolutely hop on an app. And everyone's on there now, especially since the pandemic hit. It's a lot harder to meet people out, no matter where you are. Even in Australia, where our restrictions are not really strict, we're still sort of got all these restriction when it comes to bars and having to stand up and all that sort of stuff. So I think that you need to get yourself on the app. And you need to think of it as less as the sort of old school thoughts around what online dating is. Like, there's all these midday movies where there's like catfishes, where you're not really talking to the person who you think you're talking to. And that very rarely happens anymore. There's lots of safety protocols that happen in apps. And I think the best thing you can do when setting up your profile is really just put the most authentic version of you on there, because essentially that's who you want to find a match with, is the real version of you. So if you're putting up filtered photos and you're writing a bio that you think someone wants to read, you're not actually putting yourself out there. So I go through in the book, you know, what you can do to write a good bio, what you can do to put up good photos, some rules for swiping. I think some people sit on there for hours and hours and they start to sort of forget that there's actually people behind those pictures, you know? And I think 10 minutes a day, maybe 10 minutes twice a day is all you actually need. And if you work on the stuff in the book, working on your vibration and really tuning into what it is you want, I think you will find that more of the people that are in alignment with you will show up in your feed.
Yeah, I love that advice. And I've got to ask, so when people, like I have met people and they go, I've met this really nice guy and, you know, he's so adorable but don't tell anyone. I met him online. And I'm like, and why not tell anyone? Why should we be embarrassed as women or men? Should we just drop the embarrassment if you are meeting someone online and you meet them online? Isn't that a good story to share? Like, I met someone and it's actually worked and it's working.
Absolutely. I think that we've still got these old school ideals around meeting people. I would not be embarrassed to say I met someone online. The guy I'm currently seeing, I didn't meet him on a dating app, but he actually messaged me through Instagram. So it was online, right?
Woo, this is exciting.
It's no different. I think I've got a girlfriend who met her partner online and they're madly in love. But she took a while to get on board because she didn't have the meet cute story that she wanted to be able to tell her grandchildren. But I actually think that there's something, think about those apps. There are so many people on there. And if you manage to find a connection with someone, I think that's a beautiful thing and should be celebrated and talked about. I think the stigma is being dropped. And I really do think it was one of the highlights of COVID is that everyone had to get on them. And so the stigma's sort of gone, you know?
Yeah, and I think the stigma just kind of came about where Tinder at the time was being used or marketed between, people as a hookup app. And then that was not true. Like, there are some instances when it is, but it's sort of like they tried to do the rebranding and make it like a dating app. But, you know, there are so many other apps like Bumble and Zeus where they have completely come in and gone, no, these are relationship apps. You know, these are for dating. These people are serious. They're going to pay money to be on this app. Yeah. Do you think it's worthy to be on a couple of apps?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I don't think there's anything wrong with being on a couple of apps, but I also think it's fine just to put your energy into one. You'll find, I'm in a small town, so there's like 6 people on each app. It doesn't really matter what app you're on. When you're in the city, you'll find that it's the same people on both apps. So just pick one if it's a bit overwhelming. I do think Bumble's a really good place to start. If you've never used a dating app before, it's really user-friendly. Women have to make the first move, which some women don't like, but I felt really safe doing that because with some of the other apps, you just get all these messages from men that are really unwarranted. So I think Bumble's a really easy, nice, gentle introduction to apps.
Wow. Okay. I love your advice there. You also go into a lot of advice on dating. Like, question, when we arrive to this date, should we be downloading all of our dramas from our previous relationships and dumping all of our crap onto that poor person that's thinking, woo? Tips on dating at the table. Prior to this date, should we actually tell the person what we're interested in, what we're looking for? So mutually you're on the same page.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It depends how you've met them, right? So if you do meet them on an app, I would try and have that conversation before you have to sit across the table from them. In the initial chat stages, I think the chat stages on apps are a really valuable space to be like, do I want to leave the house for this person? But also phone calls, Zoom calls, they're all very normal to be doing with people you meet online. If you've met someone out at a bar, you don't always get that opportunity. So yeah, your first date might be the opportunity just to see if you've got anything in common. I think definitely 100% don't talk about your past relationships on the first date. They just do not have, there's no room for them on date one, unless it comes up, but I can't imagine it coming up. And you really just want to get to know the other person. So be conscious of how much you're talking about yourself and whether you're actually throwing questions back to them. And also be conscious of their communication style and whether they're just talking about themselves the whole time and haven't asked you anything about you. These are the times when we can really start to spot red flags. But I always say, you know, don't dismiss people too fast on a first date because, you know, they're nervous and you're nervous. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get into rhythm with somebody, you know. So, yeah, you just have to tune back into how you're feeling and ask yourself, do I want to see this person again? Like, do I like this person? You don't have to be in love with them yet, but do I feel good when I'm around this person?
Yeah, I love that. Do I feel good when I'm around this person? Yeah. And I love that you just said no to the talking about the past relationships and what's bringing you to this date today. Oh, I'm divorced and I'm separated. Oh, I'm on a rebound. So that's good advice. You also, I loved, you learnt this from your mum actually, and I was blown away about this. Let's spot the energy vampires. This was in your book. This was incredible to read. You had a whole section kind of like dedicated, that was part of what's killing your vibe.
Yeah, so we were talking about what weakens your vibration. So there's like a chapter on the things you can do to strengthen your vibration and put you into alignment. And then there's a whole bunch of things that drag you out of it. And there was the comparison trap, which we mentioned earlier, social media. There was a whole host of things. But energy vampires were another one. And these are the people in your life that when you're around them, you just feel like you're completely being pulled out of your natural state, you know. And a lot of the time energy vampires aren't doing it consciously, but it's something that you can have conscious boundaries around. Some examples are, you know, someone that you're with who is always in victim mode. So you always have to be the rescuer. That can be very exhausting. And these aren't necessarily people you're dating. These can just be everyday people in your life that are throwing off your energetic frequency. A lot of the time we see them in toxic workplaces. They could be, you know, someone who monopolizes conversation the whole time. So it's always about them. Or what's another energetic vampire example? Somebody who is always looking to assert themselves over you. So be the dominant person in the conversation, yes, but also in the relationship. So forever putting you down and you feeling like you have to defend yourself all the time. So yeah, there's lots of examples in there, but it's just something to be conscious of when you're becoming conscious of your energetic frequency. And I find that if you can start to spot those energy vampires and not always distance yourself from them, because sometimes they're family members, but just have energetic boundaries around it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because you talk a lot about in the book about your alignment, really feeling into how you're feeling. Every step of the way, which I totally love, which sometimes we can just totally, like you said, you can get red flags, but then you can just kind of like disregard it. So got another question. So you've been on loads of dates. Another question is, at the end of the date, do you have to make a decision right there and then whether you're going to see them again? Obviously, if it was a great hit, you'd be like, oh, let's catch up again and do this. But if you feel like, oh, I just need some time to digest this, you talk a lot about whatever you do, don't ghost. Don't be that ghosting person, which I love, because I feel that we've all experienced getting smitten on someone through online dating or some form of dating, and then all of a sudden you don't hear from them and you're like, where are they? Where did they go?
Yeah,
they never told me. Yeah. So can you share a little bit more for our listeners just about the whole ghosting thing, which is becoming like a word of the era?
I think, yes, it should be in the dictionary if it's not already. I think it might be. Ghosting is basically when someone just disappears on you. And it's gained traction, I guess, through online dating because it's easy to just disappear when you're on your device, isn't it? It's what I say in the book is that ghosting says so much more about the person who's ghosting than the person who got ghosted. It's a very cowardly act. It's somebody that doesn't want to face up to a conversation. If you're not interested, I say in the book, if you're not interested in me, I would much prefer you to say to my face, I'm not interested, than to just disappear as if everything was fine and then it's not fine. And again, it's about closing the loop. It's about giving somebody some cleasure. So I go through different stages in the book, and depending on where you are in the relationship, ways in which you can leave the relationship without having to just disappear like a fart in the wind, But if you're listening and you have been ghosted, I know that it is such a horrible feeling, and you can't help but think that it's about you, but it's not. It's absolutely about them.
Wow, I love that. It's not about you being ghosted. It's absolutely about them. And I do love the advice that you give in the book, and you go into so much detail and about how to have that conversation, as difficult as it is, to say, you're not feeling the connection. And I think people really appreciate the honesty though. And at least like the few people I've ever dated, and it just has not been a hit. When you talk about energy, it's just not, the chemistry is not there, the connection, it just doesn't feel right. But I always feel it's really nice to let them know up front, like, hey, good, this date was great to catch up, but I just don't feel that connection. And they always appreciate it. They appreciate the honesty. It allows them to then go, okay, well, good luck with your choices and looks and things. So now you do loads of writing, and you have had many relationships in this book. You share quite a few. You share some hilarious stories that I just don't want to give away, but there was a moment in time. Can I say your writing is incredible? It was super easy to read, like mow down this book, and easy to read, really fun. And I was laughing, because you have such a funny sense of humor. And I just remember laughing. And it was just so really, really refreshing. And I loved how you talked about, there used to be these dating rules. And here's the thing, I remember a friend once saying to me about this book, oh, no, you can't, the rules are, if you go on the date, you must not text them. No, and when they text you to see if you're free to do something, you've got to pretend you're busy. You can't let them know that you're waiting at home to catch up with them. And I was like, and I honestly thought that was a lot of BS. But then when I read your book, I was like, yes, it's even more BS now. So you talk about so much in the book, but you really break all of the rules.
Yeah.
The old school rules.
But those rules are ridiculous. I mean, there's over 50 of them, and I've listed maybe 10 of them in the book. They were outrageous. And I actually gave that rules book to a few men in my life and said, what do you think about these? And they thought they were ridiculous as well. They were like, yeah. So I think, look, they were written in the, I can't remember now, 90s, maybe even the 80s. They've definitely aged. But they also worked for a bunch of women. So I don't know, read them if you want. I think we've progressed a lot. I'm hoping that people would pick up higher love over the rules.
No, I like the higher love approach because, like, I feel like if it's good, you feel good, you're happy, you're in sync with your energy, you're in alignment with your true self. I
Yeah.
like how we should just be our true self and like no one else and
Mm.
show up and be who we are and not change, like, not dumb ourselves down or not change our personality. Like, if we're big and loud and out there, that's who we are. If
It's who
we're
we are. And if
yeah.
you try and dull it and you try and dim it, it's going to come out eventually. So it's like you might as well have that attraction with them and then with you from the get-go, then springing it on them one day when you finally decide to be yourself, you know?
They'll be like, I never knew she was an introvert or an extrovert. Like, what?
Yeah.
So now tell me, you do loads of writing. How do you practice self-care for yourself? Like, obviously, you do loads of writing. You're very busy. You've got your podcast shows. One of the things I'm always fascinated with when it comes to authors, entrepreneurs, or brand owners, how do you take care of yourself?
When I'm writing a book, I probably don't take care of myself as much as I should. But the important thing for me these days is rest. It's the most prominent form of self-care that I can do. And I mean that by the most inactive rest I can have. So I'm not talking about lying on the couch and watching Netflix or even reading a book. I literally have to lie down, whether it's in nature or on my bed or on the couch, maybe play some instrumental music, no lyrics, and just lie there with my eyes closed and rest, maybe fall asleep. I just have found over the years that I can feel energetically zapped by sitting all day and writing as much as if I was working out all day at the gym. It gives me the same level of lethargy. So I really have to be conscious of taking those moments of rest. And I find that my brain is more active if I can do that. I'm also really conscious when I'm writing of what my productive hours are. I know my most productive hours are like 6 in the morning till about 11, and then nothing good comes out of me. So I've really kind of, if I'm in the middle of writing a book or something, I make sure that my days start like that. I'll start writing really early, and then I just take the rest of the day off and know that there's no point in actually pushing after that. In terms of self-care, I up things like yin classes, so really sort of passive exercise. I find what I used to do in my 20s was amp up the exercise because it felt really good. I got all the endorphins, but it would wipe me out. So it wasn't really worth it in the end. So now I do really gentle exercise. We've got a beautiful coastal walk in Byron that I like to do. Ocean swims. I've got a sauna at home, which is really lucky. So I have saunas when I can, and just nourish my body with really yummy foods. And yeah, that's about it, really.
Oh, that's so lovely to know, because what I found fascinating in your book, and I didn't know this, but you mentioned how you had experienced burnout. Emotionally and physically and energetically. So I was really curious for our listeners, just what are some of the things you do now as a creative? Because I'm assuming, like, I'm creative too, where I'm always kind of thinking. I'm very in my thoughts and in my head. And it's exhausting because I'm just thinking, creating, and you do podcast shows, and write books and speak and all of this, so you can really resonate with it. But that's awesome to know how you avoid that burnout.
Yeah.
One of the questions I want to ask you is, you talk a lot about external validation. Now, at the moment, all of our social media apps can be driven on external validation, or we do want people to say, I love you, you're the best, you're beautiful, you're amazing, and it can give us a dopamine hit. But you really dive into this in more detail in your book about that whole kind of topic. Can you share a little bit of insight about that for our listeners?
Yeah, I think that external validation is something that we seek without even realizing that we're doing it. But and it comes in all different forms. It comes from, somebody needing to tell us we're doing a good job, or whether it's in a relationship, someone constantly telling you that you're enough and that they love you and that they're not going anywhere and all this sort of stuff. At work, it's like, you're doing a great job. I think that what we need to start doing is being able to validate ourselves. And it really is this self-awareness piece where if you're aware of who you are and what you want out of life, then you don't need to look for the answers outside of yourself. And I think there's so many things being sold to us that's the answer to all of our problems. But really, the answer to every single problem we have is actually inside of us. And the more that we look for it externally, the more distance we create between ourselves and our own inner guidance system.
Wow, that's so beautiful. So really, if we want to really grow that connection, you would recommend, feeling, a lot of people say to me they want to be spiritual. How can I be spiritual? I want to feel spiritually connected. Do you feel that like a meditation practice would help with that? Journaling, yoga? How can someone...
For everybody.
Yes.
Everybody's got a different way to access their intuition and their level of self-awareness. I don't love journaling. It's not something that I love to do, but it resonates with a lot of people. So I think that if journaling is something that works for you, then absolutely do that. I find meditation is a really nice way for me to connect with self, but also just when you have a question about something and you need guidance on something, is asking yourself what you think is the right thing to do rather than going and asking somebody else, and trusting that you know yourself better than anyone else.
I love that. Trusting that you know yourself better than anyone else.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. Wow. That is so good. Now, I could talk to you forever and ever and ever about higher love and how we can attract the love you are oh so worthy of. But before we say goodbye, what have you loved so much about? So the book's out now. We can grab it at Aussie bookstores. I mean, it's online. What have you loved so much about seeing your brand new book coming out and being out? And since the book's launch, how does it feel?
Yeah, it feels great. It was such a hard book to write. Like, it really was quite a traumatic experience. I think just reliving a lot of relationships and trying to get it out on the page and make it sound light and joyful, which I think it does in the end. But it was quite a heavy experience. So it feels great that it's actually out in stores, and I'm really excited for people to take on these teachings and really start to embody them, because I really believe in them. And I think it's time that we really do reframe our perception of what love is.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And everybody's getting super excited over your book. We're loving it. There's even obviously Higher Love song to go with it on Instagram Reels, which I love. I was like, woo! And it's such a feel-good book, and it's gorgeous. And I know just over the last week, I've recommended your book to so many women who are like early 40s, mid 40s, getting divorced, sadly, like as sad as it is, but they want to, get back out there on dating and meeting someone. So I highly recommend they grab a copy of Higher Love. Absolutely loved reading your book. It was so much fun. A real go-to for anyone looking for love. If you're single or, you want to get back out there at any age. Age. I feel like it applies to any age. And really, I know, and you're so right. I loved how you mentioned at the start of the book and the start of this podcast show, this book can apply to any sex, any relationship of any kind. Whilst we talk about I'm the same, man and woman, it applies to anyone. of any relationship, woman, man, whatever. It's all good. So thank you again for sharing your words of wisdom, and congratulations again on the book launch. It's so exciting. You're here in Byron Bay, and always get super excited when we have books launching in Australia, and I can't wait for us to continue sharing this journey with you. So how can we stay in touch with you after the podcast show?
You can visit my website, jordannalevin.com. Find me on Instagram at Jordanna Levin. That's probably the easiest ways. I've got 2 podcast shows. One's called Lunar Lover. The other one's called Higher Love. It's like a complimentary podcast to the book. So, yeah.
Yeah. Your podcast shows are incredible. I love how honest you are, relatable. Incredible. Congratulations again. Super excited to share this Spirit Girl Galentimes, Valentines, whatever times day with you. Make Valentine's Day every day for yourself. And thank you again for joining me and the Spirit Girl community globally. Super grateful. So we'll say goodbye to our beautiful guest. I will make sure I leave in the comments below how you can stay in contact, and make sure you subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review, and tell someone you love too about the Spirit Girl podcast show. And together, let's find some higher love. Bye for now.